Welcome to the SwineTime podcast here at Pipestone. I am your host, Spencer Wayne. I'm one of the staff veterinarians here. I'm one of the owners in Pipestone Holdings, the group that's kind of the core bunch of folks here. And then we've got a lot of great talent within our group. And one of those talented people is Ethan Stas. I'm going to say Dr. Ethan Stas. Ethan is a PhD nutritionist, and he's going to tell us all about some recent learnings in a quick summarized way, I think, from the Midwest Animal Science meeting. But I'll stop and let Ethan describe himself a little bit, what your background is, where you come from, and just kind of take us into this, and we'll start hitting the topics.
Yeah. So, Ethan Stas. Been with Pipestone now as a nutritionist for coming up on a year and a half. Originally from Pennsylvania, went to Penn State University, agriculture background, have a father and a brother that are both veterinarians. Decided veterinary medicine wasn't for me, really like nutrition, so went to Kansas State University where I got my master's and PhD in swine nutrition, and then was fortunate enough to get a job here with Pipestone.
Okay, I remember we were very excited that you were coming on board. Now we're not so excited, but I'm kidding. No, we're very, very happy to have you here, Ethan. You do a great job with us. You focus mostly on grow finish or sows, or what's your nutrition angle?
Yep, mostly focus on wean to finish, so working directly with our farmers and our producers on whatever their goals are, whether it's improving production, diet cost management, improving nursery scours, anything like that.
Okay. And I've been with you a few times on farms, and stuff that a vet will miss, the nutrition catches. It's probably a good compliment, actually, to go together, because you'll see things, I mean, well, where did you catch that from? But I think we misdelivered diets. Like, you catch that like you're a cat hunting rats. You saw that right away. Beforehand, you kind of split these sessions you sit in on to gain some information into two areas. One was soybean meal, and one was how to handle E. coli. Did I get that right?
Yep.
You take us into it. So why don't we just hit them like a punch list? The soybean meal topics, kind of what was it? What are the learnings from it? And then we'll get that done and kind of summarize it to say what might be valuable to the listeners out there who farm.
Yeah, sure. So every year, big nutrition conference in Omaha, Nebraska. It's called Midwest Animal Science. It's basically the Super Bowl for nutritionists in the swine industry. So all nutritionists across different companies go, and a lot of research is presented there from not only universities but also a lot of producers. We had a talk on, coincidentally, soybean meal in some of our research we've done here too as well. But grow finish side, a lot of discussion around soybean meal. What's the optimal levels? What should we be formulating to? Is there potential additional benefits with the use of soybean meal from a health standpoint or a livability standpoint? So soybean meal is a big topic. On the flip side, on the nursery side of things, a lot of talk on E. coli, different nutritional strategies to be able to mitigate and control and prevent E. coli. So I think those are the two big topics we'll talk about today.
Good. Well, let's hammer them. I got a list here, 12 different sessions you sat in on, and if you could bullet point those in the most efficient way you think you can, just to cover the ground. So start wherever you want, and then at the end we'll kind of summarize some of the, like, here's what we know.
Yeah, so Midwest is very rapid fire. Most of the talks are 15-minute talks that lasts all day. So you have the opportunity to sit in on many different presentations. A lot of talk on soybean meal. A lot of good studies, some helpful, some not so helpful, but a lot of these, for example, there was a commercial study done where they had just under 100,000 pigs on test, so really good sample size, looking at high levels of soybean meal, low levels of soybean meal, what are the growth performance benefits, what are the potential benefits on profitability, on livability. And by consensus on not only that study, but other studies, high levels of soybean meal are going to drive growth performance in pigs.
Versus what? Amino acids and
versus more synthetic amino acids, more, lysine, HCl, more other synthetic amino acids. The use of distillers plays a role in that too as well. As you increase distillers in the diet, that's going to lower the soybean meal content. So higher soybean meal, lower distillers, lower synthetics in general is going to lead to better performance in these grow finish pigs.
As a general theme, I think that's been a few years that I've been hearing that coming from the nutritionist community of like, hey, you get an advantage when you go to more soybean meal because it's more diverse, more complex than just the amino plus whatever.
Yep.
You're missing stuff probably when you do that.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of discussion on livability, what soybean meal levels potentially can contribute to some issues such as like hemorrhagic bowel syndrome or twisted gut, or during a health challenge. There's components in soybean meal that people think specifically like isoflavones that might help with an immune response during a health challenge. So there was some discussion around that, some presentations around that. I'd say in general, no cut and dry response as far as livability, whether it's high or low soybean meal usage levels. But in general, the high soybean meal levels, running higher soybean meal is going to increase performance and is going to increase your profitability in your operation.
Let's go through these in any details you can think of. I want to get some hard nuggets and then come back and see what we got. We got number one, AMVC soybean meal study. Any details you remember from these? Like, yep, they found this or not.
Yep. So Trey Kellner from AMVC presented on this study. This was a big field study that they ran looking at different soybean meal levels. What was interesting about this study is in both of the diets, they utilized soybean meal. So the high soybean meal level wasn't necessarily as high as what I would have liked to see. But regardless, takeaways from the study were the high soybean meal level was able to improve growth performance in their operation, whether there was distillers in the diet or not. Lower soybean meal led to lower performance. They also measured livability because this was a very large sample size, no differences there. But ultimately, when they looked at margin over feed cost or economics, a higher soybean meal level led to a better return on investment than the lower soybean meal level.
Okay, and just for listeners, like that'd be two diets that were formulated to the same nutrients. Obviously, the ingredient level is different, but the same nutrient specs, just higher or low to meet that.
Correct. And in this study, it was a very well done study. They pulled the soybean meal that they utilized in the study from the same supplier. Suppliers of soybean meal can also have some nutrient variability, so that creates a little bit of noise in the research. So this one was a very well executed study that they were consistent on using the same supplier for soybean meal, so we know we can trust the response in those pigs.
Okay. Next one. If you want to skip some of these, you tell me what's worth.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go to the Gaines and Dean Boyd soybean meal talk.
Okay. What do you find?
So Dr. Aaron Gaines and Dr. Dean Boyd gave kind of a joint presentation on current strategies today with the use of soybean meal, different formulation strategies to be able to use kind of around the same theme, that we need to be setting a minimum requirement for whether it's a minimum soybean meal level, a minimum crude protein level, or a maximum synthetic lysine level. So that was the talk that they gave. Right. What should we be taking into account in our formulation software when putting together grow finish diets to get the maximum response? One thing that was interesting from their study or from their talk that we found was depending on if you're utilizing distillers and what those distillers level is, your minimum soybean meal requirement or spec is going to change. So if you're going to feed a corn soy diet, you can get away with lower soybean meal levels and still get the same performance. But if you're going to feed distillers in the diet, you need to bump up that crude protein or bump up the soybean meal level.
Okay. So I don't want to distract from our timeline and from the next topic, but it sounded like distillers throws a monkey wrench into what you got going on, so you have to compensate somehow. And the other thing is we used to formulate more and more specifically for amino acids and was all driven towards that. This is kind of like, hey, I'm getting the sense anyway that stop. You need some just basic soybean stuff in there and then formulate around these things, but don't try to over-formulate for a specific single amino acid. Is that a true statement? We
still have our minimum amino acid requirements that we take into account when we formulate. So we still meet our minimum methionine, lysine, threonine, all of those amino acids. But in addition to that, we also need to potentially have a minimum soybean meal level in the diet. So we can't just supply amino acids from synthetic sources. We also need to have the crude protein coming from soybean meal, in addition to some of those potential additional nutrient specs that it has.
Yeah. It sounds like there's stuff in there that we're going to be missing, so put it in, because it's a complex nutrient source versus a synthetic. It's just one.
Correct.
So it's to compensate for, like, stuff's in there we need. We don't know how to formulate for it exactly, but we need it. It looks like it helps.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. What else on soybean meal? What are we missing here?
One thing that's been a hot topic recently is the high oleic soybeans. So the dairy industry is really on board with using high oleic soybeans. So this is kind of a new ingredient for swine nutrition. It's probably going to be more popular coming in the future. High oleic soybeans just means high oleic acid in the soybeans. There's potential benefits from not only the soybean meal or the soybean quality, but also the oleic acid potentially has benefits as far as like sow nutrition, things around that. Maddie's not here today to speak on the benefits in sow nutrition, but it's an emerging ingredient that is probably going to become more prevalent in the swine industry. So there was a couple talks on that. Main takeaways from the talks that I saw, at least on the grow finish side with the use of high oleic soybeans, is that high oleic soybeans bring a higher fat content and in turn is going to drive performance. So not necessarily a benefit to the type of soybeans that is being utilized, but the fat content in those soybeans is driving performance. So it's more of an energy response based on what I saw.
Okay. Now, this is me being a dumb vet, but soybean comes to the plant, meal goes one way, oil goes the other. In the perfect world, they're two totally different products. But you're saying the high O stuff ends up with soybean meal that has a better fat profile in it as soybean meal, even though they've tried to take that out.
Yep, it's not necessarily soybean meal, so they're not extracting the oil from the beans. So it's just straight high oleic soybeans. It would be similar to just utilizing like full fat soybeans.
Oh,
so
okay. So this
potentially a benefit to replace some soybean meal in the diet and add some extra energy with the use of oleic soybeans.
So this is full fat ground bean meal. It's not like an extracted product.
No. Yep.
Oh, okay. That clarifies it for me. Yep. I was thinking, like, why are you talking about this when you take all the fat out?
Yeah.
I get it. Well, good. Let's summarize that. What I heard you say was soybean meal in general is a good thing in a cloudy looking concept that you need a minimum amount because we're probably missing stuff. And I am interpreting it this way. And the other thing is some of the fat profiles of these things might be worth including in diets as a special product, not like you're going to switch your soybean meal to new high oleic soybean meal. It's going to be something different coming in.
I'd say in general, main takeaways from the conference was higher soybean meal levels are going to drive performance, give you better economics as far as your operation. One thing that you need to be careful with is trypsin inhibitor in soybean meal as well too. There's certain levels that can compromise pig performance, especially has a negative effect on nursery pigs because we know nursery pigs are just more sensitive than grow finish pigs. So that's something that I think more people will continue to monitor in soybean meal is trypsin inhibitor. But if you have low enough levels, ultimately it's not going to make a difference in the diet and you can get away with the higher soybean meal levels.
Okay. Nice lead into really the other part of what you thought was interesting, which is nutritional approaches to handling early nursery diarrhea, I think.
Yes.
You frame it up differently, but that, on my end, I'm all ears for that because that's a huge topic that I would say I deal with every week in some form or fashion. Producers dealing with early nursery diarrhea, whether it's related to the genetics coming in, the environment, or the nutrition. So what did you learn about the nutritional impact?
Yeah, a lot of talks on not only E. coli and prevention of E. coli, but also just general nursery pig, wean pig scours and diarrhea. So a good bit of information was provided on that. Some consistent findings that we've seen in the past with nutritional strategies such as the use of zinc oxide to control scours post-weaning. There's been some additional research on the use of acidifiers as well to control that. There's been some talks on the use of copper in addition to zinc oxide to influence or to mitigate those post-weaning diarrhea risks. And then also kind of what levels should we be feeding of these different, whether it's an acidifier, zinc oxide, or copper, what levels and what should the step-down program be of those ingredients in nursery pig diets to ultimately get the best performance.
Yeah. So of we got listed there, any one of those you say, hey, that was cool, where you want to kind of showcase a little bit about what something presented?
Yeah, one interesting thing, this was a study done by Kansas State where they looked at a potential benefit to utilizing both pharmacological levels of zinc oxide as well as copper. So that was kind of an interesting finding, and it's different to what we have thought historically.
Which is what did you think historically?
Historically, the consensus was you only need one or the other. You either need high levels of zinc or high levels of copper.
Okay.
But this study showed that potentially there's a benefit to utilizing both of them, that they have some sort of added benefit in nursery pig diets. So that was something that I think people were interested in. I think it's something that we'll continue to evaluate if there is a added benefit to utilizing both of them, because I'd say most nutrition platforms today would utilize probably high levels of zinc, maybe not necessarily high levels of copper, but they may add copper at pharmacological levels if there is that added benefit on not only improving pig scouring, but also on performance as well.
Okay. So in my mind, just because these are not new things, you said acidifiers and zinc or copper. And for sure, well, actually all of them, but for sure zinc and copper for decades now, it's like, you can put that in. It seems to help.
Yep.
It has a general, like an antimicrobial effect or a suppressive effect on bugs like E. coli growing in the gut, which is you put it in and they have to deal with less of that, so the pig grows better because you're pushing it down. Is that a fair way to assess it? It's like a natural antibiotic almost, putting that in there.
Yep. Zinc oxide really prevents the attachment of E. coli to the intestinal wall. So the use of zinc oxide can prevent the severity of E. coli. Not saying the use of zinc oxide is going to fix E. coli by any means.
But it can help.
But it's going to definitely help.
Okay. So we should move on because I could spend forever on this topic. That's one piece of it. Acidifiers you mentioned. I'm used to doing it through the water. Is there a nutritional approach to doing acidification that helps gut environment? Or
yep. So there's a number of acidifiers out there that you utilize in the diet. Basically, what it does, similar to how it acts in the water too, as well. It's going to lower the pH in the stomach and the intestinal tract. It's going to help that pig absorb nutrients better, help it fight off pathogens better, create a more acidic environment so pathogens can't compromise the intestinal tract of pigs. Now there's some discussion and some research ongoing on what the best acidifier is to utilize, because as you know, there's many different acids that can create the base. Also, in general, acidifiers tend to have a synergistic effect. So if you're running an acidifier in the water and then you're also adding an acidifier in the feed, there's some evidence to suggest that they're going to work synergistically and they're going to have a much more beneficial outcome than utilizing just one acidifier in the feed or just one acidifier in the water.
Okay. To me, that's very interesting because we've thought about it in the water and haven't thought about the feed. At this meeting, were there any things floating to the top like, hey, here's a good product choice for the nursery diet, for the synergistic effect, to complement what we're doing in the water? Is there any kind of consensus like these are good things, whether it's a type of acid or how to do it?
I think whatever acidifier you're potentially using in the water, changing the source of the acid in the feed could have a potential positive benefit. So if you're utilizing, say, a formic acid in the water, you may benefit from using a different acid in the feed, such as a benzoic acid. Whereas you may not get the same benefit if you're using a benzoic acid in the water and then also a benzoic acid in the feed.
Okay. So producer out there listening is going to say, hey, I got nursery scours. I know my vet's got me doing the stuff in the water, and we're doing the vaccine, I'm doing the sanitation in the feed, whether it's our nutrition team, which you're part of, or another company. Is that topic of nursery feed acidification floating around there in discussion? Like if they asked their nutritionist, if they asked us, we would have some guidance on that, or is that totally too new? I have no idea if it's new stuff or not.
We would definitely have some guidance on it. Double checking what is the acidifier if you are using one in the feed. What does that look like, and how does that compare to what you're utilizing in the water? Kind of linking those two together for a whole coverage of basically what that pig is ingesting.
Is that so? The acidification piece. If somebody says, "I got scours I'm dealing with, I'm doing all these things," and you said, I can get you a diet for that. Would this be part of that diet? Or is it really like maybe? Or is it for sure we're going to do something with acidification?
You for sure want to do something with acidification. There's an emerging topic that not only looks at acidifier use, but also kind of a whole diet coverage on acidification. I did a lot of this work in grad school too as well. It's called acid binding capacity of the diet, or ABC4. So we often add acidifiers to the diet to acidify that pig's intestinal tract. That's not a new concept. That's been done for a long time, but an emerging concept is taking a whole diet approach. So just as we formulate to like amino acid levels in the diet, we can also formulate to an acid binding capacity level, or ABC4 level, taking into account the acidification of things like soybean meal, corn, synthetic amino acids, distillers. So instead of just an individual acidifier, it's covering the entire diet.
Sounds like you might have to have really good software to handle that, or maybe not. Maybe it's
it's just like any other nutrient. And it's just like,
put some
lysine or crude protein, whatever it is. So, yeah.
Well, we probably should wrap this up. We could talk a long time on all this stuff. Splitting it into soybean meal and some new work on that, and how to handle E. coli. You mentioned a few things in there, the ABC4, which is kind of a holistic approach to how you handle the acid profiles and ingredients in the diets. Zinc and copper, or zinc and copper, might be combo. That kind of covers in broad strokes what you dealt with. For producers listening out there, kind of frame up what you're out there listening, like, what did I learn? What did you learn that might be something the producer is going to see on their horizon as something to decide or consider for their own diets?
Yep. I would say on the grow finish side, the big topic was soybean meal at the conference this year. Soybean meal usage is everyone knows, is not a new concept, but there's additional things that we should be considering and looking at from a soybean meal perspective. One of those is trypsin inhibitor levels. What levels should we be avoiding to get maximum performance out of our pigs? And then also, I think we need to dig into the livability response as well, too. There's some opinions and suggestions that different levels of soybean meal or the use of distillers can affect livability in pigs, but I don't think we necessarily know what that is. That's one thing that we'll continue to dive into. We're gaining bits of information on that and starting to piece that puzzle together. But in general, the things we know today is higher soybean meal is going to have nutritional components outside of amino acids. That's probably going to drive performance in those pigs rather than just the use of synthetic amino acids. On the nursery side, a lot of talk on gut health, different diet strategies that we can utilize today to help control post-weaning diarrhea. Again, the use of acidifiers and zinc oxide is not a new concept, but things like acid binding capacity of the diet, taking a holistic approach rather than just throwing an acidifier in the diet, is going to have potentially more benefits on nursery pig gut health. So we really need to dig in to what those benefits are and how do we make that an economical implementation into the diet to be able to get not only beneficial results, but also keep our diet costs low.
Okay. All right. And for the sake of time, we better cut it off there. But I don't know. I always learn a lot when I talk to you and the folks on our nutrition team. New stuff, I don't know. I'm glad we got smart people like you to figure this out. So people have nursery scour issues, probably give you a call, ask some questions about how to incorporate some of the stuff. And for formulation of soybean meal, same. Give a call, figure out might be some savings or improvement in performance.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you to our listeners for spending time with us today here at Pipestone at the SwineTime podcast. And thanks to Ethan, our guest.